Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion focused on engineering onboarding. We have multiple subject matter experts in the area with us here, and we will have a quick round of introductions. So let me stop sharing the screen, and we will start talking to each one of the participants. And we will start with Ilse. Ilse, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, nice of you to have me here, and nice to be here. My name is Ilse White. I am a corporate learning researcher with Learnovate. We are a applied research centre in the area of education and education technology associated with Trinity College Dublin. And my specific focus, one of my specific focuses over the past few months has been onboarding, and particularly remote onboarding. Before joining Learnovate, which was in February, I spent 15 years in Google. The last year and a half of that was in people development, and I was responsible for Google's onboarding introduction in EMEA. And so yes, lots of experience with onboarding, and I've also been onboarded remotely, so I can call myself a little bit of a subject matter expert at this point.
Thank you very much, Ilse. And we continue with Sandy.
Hi, everybody. So excited to be here. I am Sandy Friend, and I am currently a manager of documentation and technical training for the engineering group at LinkedIn. I've been in the high-tech industry now for 30 plus years, dating myself there, but I really love education. So I've been doing instructional design and onboarding and instructing for 20 plus years. And I have created the onboarding program at LinkedIn. It's been about 8 years now. We've been iterating through that process and having the ability to expand our engineering team. When I started, it was about 2,000, and we're now at 7,000 people. So getting all those different engineers on board at LinkedIn and making sure that they are productive in their work. So I'm super excited to share with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandy. And we continue with Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann Hamilton. I'm the Principal Program Manager of the Azure Engineering Learning Team. And like Sandy, I come from a strong instructional design background and do a lot to onboard all the engineers that join us here at Microsoft.
Thank you very much, Ann. And Jennifer.
Hey everyone, great to be here today. I'm Jennifer Pettoff, but my friends call me Dr. J. I'm Google's Director of SRE Education, or SRE-EDU. I'm wearing my rainbow unicorn shirt today, which is our program mascot, if you will. I'm based in Dublin, Ireland. And I've been at Google for 14 years. I like to say time flies when you're having fun, of course. You may be wondering why Dr. J? Well, I have a PhD in chemistry and started my career in the lab working on things that could start on fire or explode when you expose them to air. I currently lead the SRE-EDU program, which is responsible for onboarding all new SREs to Google, also training throughout the life cycle of an SRE and delivering reliability-focused education to the broader engineering community at Google. Just a fun fact, when we aren't living in the pandemic, I love to travel, and I'm a part-time travel blogger at Sidewalk Safari.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jennifer. And before we move forward with the first discussion, I will be your moderator. My name is Daria, and I'm from Azure. And we start with big questions and challenges in engineering onboarding. Anne, could you share with us a little more about this?
Sure. Microsoft in Azure, in cloud, what we call the Cloud and AI group, we onboard anywhere from 300 to 800 new engineers a week. So making sure that they are able to come in and feel comfortable and feel productive and be able to be performant as early in their career as possible is really important to what we want to do. So when new engineers come to us, it's some of the key challenges are getting them the essential tools that they need. You know, just even having the laptop in the way that they can use it, or any of the hardware equipment or permissions that they need is so important. And then making sure that they feel welcome and very much a part of the team is tricky, especially in these times, and making sure that they understand and are committed to joining the culture and being a part of the bigger picture of the work that we're doing. Those are really the key things that we see here in Azure.
I think I'll also would be happy to weigh in if that works for you, Daria. Thanks, Anne. Couldn't agree more with the things that you say in terms of those sort of big questions and challenges around onboarding. One additional thing that I'll add is just thinking about onboarding not as an exercise in spraying people with a fire hose of information, but with building confidence. That's a lot of times what it's all about. You've got someone coming into the door for the first time at your company, like, do I belong here? Do I know what I'm doing? Like, how, it can seem quite daunting when you're joining a new organization. So building confidence, I think, is one of the key challenges and opportunities as we look at onboarding. I also wanted to mention a couple of challenges from running the program perspective. So I like to think about it as well. Like with running a training program, there can be elements of I like to think of as unconscious bias. Like many people think that developing and delivering training programs is easy. I gave a training once, I could do that. Yes, but helping the organization understand what resources and time is required to develop and deliver an impactful training program is an important challenge. Speaking of impact, that is another important question. So how do we know that our onboarding training is effective? It's easy to stop at the smile sheets. My attendees like the training, so it must be effective. But that's you really need to go beyond that, I would say, in looking at impacts.
So weighing that balance, Jen, is so important about figuring out the difference between training I love and training that made me perform and enroll. We see that at Microsoft too. It's like the boot camp that we put people through. We call it a boot camp because it's not easy and it's going to be a full on week's effort. But you go away with the knowledge that you need instead of just water cooler and donuts. It's hard work, and so getting people in there and having them invest their time and energy is such an important part of that balance.
No, plus one. So it's it's not always easy. It's important to go beyond, like I say, the smile sheets. Again, we look at things like have we built up the new hires' confidence? How do we assess that? And even things like SRE has a very particular culture associated with it, or cultural tenets, at least at Google, in terms of things like blameless culture and automating away toil and not just doing repetitive ops work, etc. So can our training programs actually perpetuate that organizational culture as well with the new hires?
Thank you. That's great to learn about those challenges. And I believe there would be challenges on both sides, from engineers who are the onboarding and on the team who is building this onboarding experience. And I'm sure that in the last few years, a lot have changed. And not only because of pandemic, but also before pandemic, the evolution of technologies would drive the changes in the requirements. So Ilse, I know you have a lot of experience and you did a lot of research in this. Would you mind to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot has changed. And I think the big thing that I think has changed is that organizations are beginning to wake up to the business value and the business proposition around onboarding, that it's not just an add-on, it's a really intricate process, and it has an impact on the business, both from the point of view of getting the right people in, but also the investment and the resources that it takes to find the right people, hire them, onboard them. There's a lot of time and a lot of resources that are involved with that, and I think that particularly bigger organizations who onboard a lot of people and who are in the market to attract the best talents to their organizations. I mean, everybody is, but bigger organizations do it at scale, are beginning to kind of realize that there is more to onboarding than just that kind of first day and first introduction. I think that's the big change that we're seeing. So it's a detailed process, and it's so detailed actually that I have a couple of slides to share with you. So if you bear with me for 1 minute, I will pull them up. Can I just get a thumbs up to see if you can see this? Yes, okay, great. So and these are just some of the key stats that we as a center made us actually research this topic in more detail. And the 83% on the in the green kind of represents the number or the percentage of organizations that feel that they have a good onboarding process in place. And then I guess you can already kind of preempt what that 13% signifies, and that's the percentage of new hires who actually feel that their onboarding experience was a good experience. So there is a big disconnect there, right? So what we have done over the last 6 months is to really kind of dive into that and really understand why that is. And really the big, sorry, I'm trying to move my slides forward here. Yeah, and the big sort of where this gap comes from is that really like most of the onboarding programs are focused on the second kind of pillar that you see here, which is the introduction and the orientation, that first day, getting people in. But really it's a much bigger process, and it actually already starts, like I said before, when you start your hiring process and getting people in, even before a new hire starts a job. The onboarding process starts, and then you have your first day, but it continues after that. And really onboarding, the first 90 days of onboarding, so the first 3 months, are really critical to slowly ramp up the person, not just to the organization, but into their role, into their teams, and really kind of giving them the time to come to grips with what it is that their role is all about, how the role fits into the organization, and what sort of the specific and functional technical requirements are for the role in a new context for them. But really what the research is telling us is that that onboarding process can be as long as a year. It takes a year for people to go through all of the stages that they experience as new hires before they are fully onboarded into an organization. And things like giving them assignments, for example, and giving them scaffolded assignments where you start small and kind of build on that in combination with that ongoing development and ongoing support of that development is crucial to a really successful onboarding experience. But what we're seeing and what we're hearing from organizations and from new hires is that really the focus is really on that introduction orientation, that the first day or maybe that first week. I won't go through these in a whole lot of detail, but some other things that are not working so well is that companies often take a one-size-fits-all approach, but really the diversity in new hires couldn't be bigger, right? They're all different with different levels of experience, different experience in other jobs, or it could be their first job, different reasons for joining an organization or joining their particular role. So they come as varied as can be. And another thing that was really interesting that we found out is that new employees don't always know what to expect from their onboarding experience or from their organization. Organizations tend to kind of focus on this information dump on people, like give them everything that we think they need, but there is not that two-way conversation about what it is that they might need or where they are at. So there's not that two-way communication happening. On the plus side then as well is that, like, if you really want your onboarding to work, do invest in that really warm welcome, particularly with a move to remote onboarding. That's extra important because there's not that kind of rite of passage of walking into a building. There's nothing worse for a new hire, and this is happening quite a lot, where you have received your laptop and you don't see anybody until your second day in the job, and there's no worse experience. The other thing as well is to set expectations for people, provide a roadmap of what they can expect over the weeks and months that they're there, and make sure that any tasks that you give them are relevant and specific, and so that they know what they can expect and can ask targeted questions and kind of focus their efforts on getting to grips with information to those particular aspects of their plan, if you like. So when we looked at the literature around this, we sort of combined a lot of the kind of key insights into this graphic, and I know there's a lot of detail in here, but it's not as complicated as you think it is. So let me just quickly walk you through that. So really, the first step as an organization is to think about what your psychological contract looks like. And this is really like a set of unwritten rules and processes that kind of determine what value is put on the individual that comes into the organization and what the expectations are from the organizations that the individual needs to adhere to, but also what can the individual bring to the organization. So it's that sort of those unwritten rules which really form the basis of how you view your people strategy, how you view your people policies. And that's the foundation for any kind of people process, including onboarding. Then the second step in there, and I'm sorry I'm going on a bit here, but is to understand the value of onboarding for your organization. So really kind of looking at it from a cost benefit angle. And then step 3 and 4 is really coming back to that onboarding is a process, and it's a process both from a business point of view, and it's a process from the individual new hire point of view, and they align, right? You can align them. So as you can see there, is that you kind of start with building the business process. Onboarding takes a lot of internal processes that need to be aligned. It's the duck that floats on the water and all the pedaling that happens under the water to get everybody on board, all noses pointing in the same direction. You know, it's because there are so many partners, it's a complicated process to get right. But you can build it in such a way that it aligns with how the employee adjusts itself to the organization. Like at the beginning, they just need to be able to make themselves efficient, like have their laptop set up, have all the benefits selected, all of that kind of like critical to-dos. But then, and they need to have that role clarity, understand what job they starting into and what's expected of them. And then as you go through time, things like social integration and the knowledge of the culture are becoming more important because they'll have the headspace to focus on it then. Like these stages, it's not possible to change these around. Like it's just what happens when you're onboarding in a new role. And in order for onboarding to be successful, it's important for an organization to understand those steps in the process and align them with the actual business process that's happening in the background, so that it's a smooth user experience, for lack of a better word. Last thing I'll say is that there is a lot of technology, particularly in the online environment, that kind of supports it. But just understand that people are coming into a situation where they have to get familiar with new tools, new systems, new cultures around using those tools and systems. So yes, technology is great, we all know that, but it's really important not to make any assumptions about how people interact with those or what they're used to, but really kind of think thoughtfully about how these best can be leveraged. So this is sort of in a nutshell the conclusion of our research. And I think what it comes down to is that we recommend for organizations to take a holistic approach to their onboarding strategy. And what it's showing us through our field research is that that just does not happen right now. And particularly with the shift to remote onboarding, it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to move everything online. So what I'm expecting to see going forward is that those online, remote, or hybrid processes around orientation and onboarding will be refined, and hopefully organizations start to consider it more like a process and implement some of these best practices.
Thank you very much, Ilse. Sandy, what do you think?
I would just like to add one more thing. This is amazing information and is exactly what we're seeing as well. One more thing that we are seeing, though, is that the onboarding process actually works in conjunction with retention. So you are spending all this time recruiting this person, and if you don't give them a good onboarding experience, they're not going to stay with you. They need that foundation, they need those pieces. So we're also seeing that there's a retention factor that goes in conjunction with this, and you can use that to look at the cost of your onboarding and happiness of your developer. The other thing I think has become super important, especially since the pandemic, is the whole belonging piece of this. We have gone from a world where instructor-led in-class type onboarding, where you got to have all that camaraderie and meet all your people, and that's kind of gone away with the pandemic, right? So one of the bigger changes we're also seeing is just the extra effort you have to put in to get that belonging and get that continuity, and just know what the values of the company are and how the company works, and just all those pieces and parts that were very easy to happen just in a normal day-to-day as you're going through the office are not available anymore. So you have to really build that in and make sure that that's part of your program as well. So the value proposition in our world, which I kind of laugh at, is instructor-led was training, and anything that wasn't instructor-led really wasn't considered training. And now with the pandemic, we're seeing the shift into, oh, look, this can be training too, watching a video or reading an article, or I can learn in these ways as well. So it's opened up a lot more opportunity for us to deliver content in different ways. And that also helps with spreading out the onboarding process so that there's enough time and space between activities for them to actually understand it and embody it and be able to really work with it, instead of us just telling them and they work right then and then they forget half of it, right? So adding that space and adding that ability to learn in a lot of different modalities has actually really helped the onboarding process, I think. Not everybody learns well in an instructor-led, and they leave the classroom and they forgot half of what they learned. So I think this, these are some of the shifts that we're seeing, but retention is definitely one of the things that we can definitely correlate directly to their onboarding process.
That's a great learning there. Thank you, Sandy. And Jen, in your experience, what are the different stages of onboarding? So we heard Ilse sharing the industry learnings, but I'm sure that you also have a lot of learnings there.
Sure. Yeah, happy to address that. I did want to say, first of all, thanks to Ilse for sharing those findings, because I think it validates a lot of our anecdotal observations, intuition that we have in running these sorts of programs. Also, +1 to what Sandy's saying about a well-architected onboarding program being a key tool for retention. If you just let people sink or swim, you're not going to be very effective at keeping your people. And then the other thing that Ilse said that really resonated with me was just around like aligning processes and how important that is. I think the how of running training programs is often overlooked. It's about the content, it's about what you're delivering, but oftentimes, especially in larger organizations, there's multiple teams involved. There's different handoffs in the process. So kind of, there's this perception of the duck or the swan moving smoothly across the surface, but like there's a lot of paddling going on underneath that surface. So really, really resonated with me. But now on to the question that you asked, Daria, about the different stages of onboarding. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit from the point of view of someone who is onboarding into the organization and kind of what might be going through their mind psychologically. But first of all, we believe, as I mentioned previously, that onboarding is not about teaching facts or spraying people with a fire hose of information and hoping that some of it sticks. I mean, Sandy alluded to this as well, but rather it's about building confidence. And so we've seen that there's definitely distinct stages when it comes to confidence. So there's the sort of everything is awesome and shiny and new stage, and here I am on day one, like super exciting. And then imposter syndrome sets in as you realize how much there is to learn and what that learning curve actually looks like. We focus a lot on building that confidence, helping people get over that imposter syndrome to hopefully get to the stage where it's like, I've got this and I'm ready to go on call for my service, or I'm ready to really contribute to the services that I am supporting. And then finally, once that happens, we move into the sort of ongoing education phase where people are just continuing to upskill, learn new things, branch out into different areas. So more sort of elective education.
Yeah, Jennifer, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that the challenge, like it's a challenge to get that right at an internal level, right? So to get everybody to agree what the onboarding kind of experience should look like, but then like where it gets even more complicated is how the new hire experiences that, right? Because it's one thing. Like I remember that from my time in Google, like the first question that people would ask is, can you explain to me what my role is, for example? Like people don't necessarily know, right? And it's a very kind of scary and frightening thing to come into a big company where everybody seems to know what they're doing, and you're not 100% sure of what your team is or what your team does. So there's a definitely like taking away all of those kind of basics and making sure that there is a time and a space to explain that is so important. And it's really important to consider the kind of the emotions that the new hire feels throughout all of this, because it might be very clear to all of us, but it might not be so clear to somebody who is trying to take everything in. And Sandy, what you were saying about retention really resonates. There are some staggering statistics, particularly with more senior hires, where the support or the onboarding support is just not there, and like over 50% of senior hires leave within a year or fail in their role because they were never set up properly, and there's a big there's the same figures apply, for example, for more temporary hires who don't start in full-time roles. So the stats around this are definitely not in our favor. So yeah, it's interesting to hear that is recognized by you guys, so because it's definitely something that we're hearing back from both the people that we interviewed and who are leading onboarding, but also from the people who are going through that. So yeah,
it's very interesting learning. I would never guess that statistics would be that bad. And this leads us to discuss how onboarding process is built and how did it change in the last year, because the pandemic, well, influenced all our processes, obviously. And could you share your experience, please?
Sure. For us, a lot of it is similar to what Ilse and Jen described. We had used a methodology of in-person training as a way to bring everybody together, not only to share like here's what we are, but to give them a chance to see our culture in action, to have it modeled for them, and to give them a safe space to learn and to practice their culture. So you think about the difference between an early in career employee coming in and somebody who's worked in the industry for some time. Our bootcamp program is the first place where they get to spend a week with each other. So the early in careers find out, hey, you know, I belong here. I can contribute meaningfully. You know, here I just sat down with in a group session with a partner or a principal and shared my ideas, and they validated me. I'm walking out of boot camp with 80 new close friends who are there to support me. So then when you take that to an online experience, the learning did become more transactional. It became more about, okay, I'm going to complete my labs, I'm going to watch these videos, and less about building cohorts. So one of our real challenges was how to bring together effective cohorts that were diverse in nature, so everybody got a chance to see how we all benefit from inclusion and from growing together.
Plus one to that, and yeah, I was just going to say plus one to that, like the social and relationship building aspects, the cohort aspects, I think is one of the harder parts about managing through the pandemic. And it's interesting, like we stuck with an instructor-led model, but just moved to video conference as opposed to self-paced learning. So just to tell you a little bit about how we've done it and how things are changed to compare and contrast. Before the pandemic, we had every new SRE at Google would fly to one of our major hub locations in North America or Europe for this 1 week of in-person instructor-led SRE EDU orientation. And again, it was all about like there's a key element of that is, you know, we're in this together, the relationship building, the cohorts. The curriculum is a mix of short lectures and our flagship breakage scenarios, so we can break various aspects of our SRE EDU photo service on demand, and students work in groups of 3 to troubleshoot, mitigate, and fix those issues. And again, that's been demonstrated to build confidence right from the start. And again, when the pandemic hit, like everything moved to video conference, we're running everything on Google Meet. The curriculum was essentially the same. We made a few modifications to support the delivery over Google Meet. For example, more teaching assistants to support the breakage scenarios, since the TAs couldn't just like walk around the room like they could in the past. And I would just put in a plug, like if you want to learn more about either our pre-pandemic onboarding program or what changed post-pandemic, you can check out the SREcon 2019 and 2020 presentations that I did with JC Van Winkle.
Yeah, those were fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. And similar training experience on our side. We got to pivot and adapt and try a lot of different things. So now we run a live Teams version of our training, and then on alternate weeks, a video base, so that we're meeting the needs of everyone, so that those who are really more able to join in a lecture scenario get the benefit of that, where we do cohort learning activities, labs, games, etc. And then those who are really more, who benefit more from the self-study, they have the ability to pace that at will, so that they can adapt to their COVID lives, kids being home, and all the other things that are going on that make an 8 to 5 in training live session unavailable to them.
So if you were to go back to pre-pandemic times, what would you bring with you over from what you learned during pandemic time from the onboarding perspective?
From our program, we're planning to do a lot of piloting to see how we can make the in-person benefit from some of the out of time band work. So we're experimenting with hybrid classes, and we're already starting to do that through our development center in Israel. And then we plan to bring that back to our other centers around the world.
Jennifer, what would you bring?
I would, so again, thinking about it from an operational perspective, again, I think one of the nice things about running virtual training and classes is not having to deal with like travel arrangements and room bookings and those sorts of things. So I would bring the easier operations back with me. In addition, like Anne was pointing out, like different people learn in different ways. So not everybody, maybe you've got an introvert who doesn't the ILTs don't, the instructor-led trainings don't work as well for them, or the more collaborative types of things. Maybe they prefer a video model or something they can refer back to. So having the multiple learning modalities, I think, is another thing that I would bring back.
Fantastic. Sandy, what would be the general challenges that you experience with onboarding in the last years?
So some of the challenges that we are running into tend to come around some of the stuff that Anne and Jen were just talking about, and the fact that we're moving to a hybrid world where we were not really in a hybrid world before, and how do we accommodate that? And I think us moving to this is actually making a stronger program in our world, because what we were doing before is we really had a 4-day fire hose type of environment. And then from there, they had mentor-led hands-on labs that were more specific to their roles. And then from there, they moved into team onboarding, where their team would onboard them and get them ready to go. And in relying on that type of a tiered environment, it actually, we thought it was working okay, but as we were finding out, in that some teams really didn't have a good structure with their onboarding process. And so it kind of left those poor people who happened to be on that team getting a lesser experience, as opposed to people who were going to a team that had a much more robust environment or setup, right? So by us kind of taking this on and really looking at what we're delivering and how we're delivering it, we're able to pull some of that stuff that the teams were doing for onboarding into the actual onboarding process that we are delivering. And that leaves only really very team specific things that they have to cover at the team level. So that's been some of the challenge that we've adjusted and seen. The other thing that's happening, just not necessarily in our industry, but in the world in general, the generation of people that are coming in think and do things differently than some of the other generations that we've been working with, and that they are a lot more video savvy. They want to like watch a quick video. They want to do a quick search and find things. They want to learn in a different way than some of the other people may want to learn in. So being able to offer the different modalities has also helped in that perspective, and that they don't want to sit in a classroom and listen to somebody talking to them all day. They want to actually like zip through a video, and they can jump around and they can mark places and go back to it later. So we're, blending things together and offering multiple options to try to help accommodate that. But I think for challenge wise, another thing to think about is that when people come in, and Jen and several of you guys have alluded to this, when people come into your world, they're coming into a proprietary environment, right? So they really have to not just learn what their role is, they have to take the skills they have and figure out how to apply it into this proprietary environment. And that on it to itself is a huge task, right? So, you know, they may have skills that are missing just in general for normal things. And then on top of that, they have to learn these special tools and stuff like that, that only exist inside this world, right? So that adds another level of complexity to it, and another, like, you know, Jen was talking about making sure that people feel confident, right? Well, they've never seen these things before. So building their confidence in these things and showing them how these things work is a huge part of our onboarding process. That's really more of what we're doing, as opposed to showing them, you know, here's your code piece or whatever. They know how to code, you know, but these proprietary systems as infrastructure and stuff they're coming into is really what we're focusing on. So that's been some of the challenging for us. And specifically for SREs, like we're kind of talking in general, but SREs in particular, their worlds are not consistent from job to job. That is just a known fact, right? Every time you come in, you have internal tools you are using, you're doing things different ways. So a software engineer may have some more tools and skills that transfer from job to job, where SREs, they always have new things that they have to work on. So that are definitely some of the challenges that we're seeing and we've been trying to work with to accommodate.
And a couple of things, I'm just going to jump in there, Sandy, because a couple of things really resonated with me there. There was the issue of the proprietary technology, and just, you know, you're dealing with a whole bunch of tools and systems you've never seen before. We once had a person come in from the outside, an experienced industry hire, to say, could you make me a like decoder key on how, you know, these open source or industry tools map to Google's production infrastructure? So that, I think that highlights your point.
Yes.
So plus one. And then you were talking a little bit about how Gen Z, for example, works differently. And it's interesting. I was on a multi-generational panel about the changing face of tech, representing Gen X in this case, but was on the panel with a 13-year-old from Gen Z or Gen Z, depending on where you're from. And it was interesting. She was saying she would get help with her math homework on TikTok. So maybe we need to have like SRE training on TikTok. What do you all think of that? You heard it here first.
I don't know about TikTok, but we definitely are making things very short when we're creating things so that they can find their answers in short snippets of stuff. But yeah, wouldn't that be funny to have things on TikTok?
Well, when you do that, and this is something that came out of our research, is that there is a real expectation that whatever content you provide has to be super high quality. Like, you don't get away with, you know, a few slides and a voiceover. Like, it has to be engaging, more engaged, particularly for those generations. They have really high expectations around the content itself, but also the discoverability of that content. You know, they don't want to kind of look, as somebody described it, like through a ball full of elastic bands to get to the nugget of information that's hidden inside it. It has to be ready and easy to find. So yes, training by TikTok would be great, but it has to be top notch.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that discoverability piece right now, and that's one of the things we're really struggling actually to accommodate, because we have content and training in so many different places, and being able to pull that all into one place, so they have one place they can search and find, and everything's labeled and tagged appropriately. So it's definitely an issue that we're running into, as well as that discoverability piece.
One thing
Discoverability and trustability. Sorry,
Yes.
like I was just going to say,
Yes.
like the
Quality.
not encountering something that's outdated, or, you know, like what's canonical. And sorry to talk over you there, Anne. Please carry on.
Not at all. So it's something else that Sandy said. Being in a highly matrixed organization, different training groups are often bumping into other groups. So we've got like what happens at the corporate level with like standards of business conduct type training and general new employee orientation type programs, et cetera. So as we work across those layers in our matrix, we talk about federal, state, and local. And then each of those has a way of attuning their content so that it's level appropriate. And that's a good way to talk about, the individual team needs at a local level where they use certain tools and techniques, and there's different state-of-the-art kind of nomenclature and approaches versus at the federal level where things really need to be very generic and general. So what we're finding is Azure Engineering Learning is really at the state level. We're looking across engineering organizations under the major umbrella, but we're also talking a lot about county. What happens between state and local, and we're finding that there's a lot of magic that happens in the county level about getting to those specific needs, and where systems cross over or break down between teams, that there's a lot of magic there.
So obviously magic is where systems break down, which brings us to the delta between onboarding SRE and generic engineering onboarding. And Jennifer, I know you have a lot of experience in both. So would you mind to share with us?
Sure. So I think the main difference between general engineering onboarding and SRE specific onboarding is the fact that SRE isn't taught in school. Like, let's just put that out there. So in a lot of ways, SRE specific onboarding is about perpetuating the SRE culture, vanquishing toil through automation, blameless postmortems, the importance of monitoring and SLOs. Whereas for general onboarding, it could be about building upon what you've learned in school. So how do I code? How do I actually write a piece of software? And like an SRE again is about like, how do we design and run services at scale? So just there's more
main pain points then.
So the main pain points. Yeah, so just it's for example, if you have new grads who are purely software engineering focused, giving them that systems engineering mindset, or again thinking about operating at scale without feeding the machines with human toil. So some of it's just a lot of ways it's about a mindset shift, and then learning a lot about the breadth of production infrastructure. So that's another difference as well. Like a lot of times, our software engineers will be working on a very small, like a feature, a part of a product, etc. Maybe more at the local level, whereas SREs operate at more of the federal level, as Anne was saying. So you're looking across production. So teaching breadth rather than depth in that case.
Yeah, I agree, Jennifer. It definitely has a lot to do with the software engineers actually really focused on writing their code versus an SRE is focused on this big picture of keeping these things up and running at scale. And there's a lot of different, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of different infrastructure that's involved in that particular process that SREs may not have had experience with in previous jobs. So every time we're onboarding, it's not from ground zero, but it's pretty close, right? They have their base skills they come in with, but then we have to actually show them, the automations that we have in place, the infrastructure we have in place, the tools that we're using, what are the rules around things, and what happens when something goes awry, who's notified when. All those things are very proprietary in how an individual company handles it. So it definitely has a steeper learning curve as an SRE, and it tends to be a longer learning curve as well. So there are a lot of companies that set an expectation for an SRE to be on call within their first couple of weeks. Well, my goodness, if you're on call on something, how could you have possibly learned that big picture in the first couple of weeks, right? So setting the correct expectation so that a person feels confident and comfortable being on call, right? Maybe they're only on call for a little piece of it as opposed to the big picture of it. So I think there's a definite gap in the setting of the expectation, the level that the SRE is able to come in at, and what things they need to know. And I think that needs to be balanced out and aligned. And we can do the onboarding, but until they get in and really play with these things and work with these things and understand all the stuff, it takes time, right? And so they can't be expected right after onboarding to be able to go on call. That just isn't realistic. The other thing I find that happens a lot too, especially in the SRE realm, is a lot of tribal knowledge. And so, things tend to be more well documented in the software engineering world just because you're using, platforms and languages that have been around for a long time, right? Where, you come into this SRE world and you're trying to maintain or keep things up at scale. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, when this happens, we do this, right? But nobody has remembered to document that down. So there tends to be tribal knowledge. Tribal knowledge tends to be larger in the SRE realm. And that's something that we're working on to try to get more of that documented. And the more things get automated, the less there's a need for that. But until you get those things going, you end up with a lot of that tribal knowledge going on.
Tribal knowledge and hero culture, right?
Exactly. Definitely that hero culture comes in as well. And that gets with the imposter syndrome, right? So here comes this SRE who saved the day. And I'm like, oh, I can never be that good. Well, that's not going to happen every time, right? So they kind of go hand in hand, that hero syndrome and imposter syndrome. They're together in that group.
And I was just going to say, like, expecting an SRE to go on call and within a couple of weeks of onboarding, yet not only is that unrealistic, that's asking for heroism, and also definitely not setting a person up for success right from the start. So I think we look at it like there's an expectation that it's going to be 3 months, 6 months, could be up to a year, depending on the complexity of the services that the team that the people are on and the services that they're supporting in terms of when they'll go on call. And like managers, like part of their job is making sure the person has that time and space to ramp up. And I was going to say something else, but now I lost the point there. So I'll leave it at that. I was just like, oh my God, 1 to 2 weeks on call. That scares me.
Yeah, we've moved away from that, but that when I first started, working on this program 8 years ago, that was the intention, was once you got through the program, you were going to go on call. We've moved away from that now, and we actually use a buddy system and everything. So even when they do go on call, they're on with a buddy system for the first few on calls. So it's a much smoother, much easier and less stressful on-call process that we have now. But that was the expectation when I first came, and I was like, you've got to be kidding. That will not work.
And like, I do remember what I was going to say now. So you were talking about, the tribal knowledge, and I was thinking, or it's more of like the oral tradition within SRE. So there's this passing down of the stories, and I think there's that a lot of that, the in-person onboarding experience, our orientation program, like a lot of the parts that are most highly rated are the war stories, the historical context, etc. So documentation is one thing, but I think the storytelling is a key component to the perpetuation of the culture and bringing people up to speed.
100%, Jen. I think that it's like learning by osmosis, right? Learning from the conversations that are going on around you, and like all of that. Like you just don't get that when you're in a remote or an online scenario, because every conversation that you have is planned, is scheduled. So you just don't get those informal chats. Maybe when you're having those conversations, but not sort of on a regular basis. And so being remote or being onboarded online can exacerbate some of those feelings of isolation and imposter syndrome, because you pick up a lot from what's going on around you or from what you hear from others, and that particular part is just really, I think that is possibly the biggest challenge with remote onboarding is to come to grips with that context and understand what that means for your role. It's very difficult to get right, and don't think it can be replaced in this scenario.
Thank you, Ilse. We are very out of time, but I wouldn't want to finish this panel without asking the question that comes so many times. So how do you educate yourself to become an SRE? Because there is no college degree right now that would teach you that. So I will leave this question to each one of you. What do you think?
Well, I would say studying aspects of non-abstract large system design can be helpful. And we've published some open source materials at sre.google/classroom for folks that might want to take a look at that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone else would have any recommendations?
I would say the other thing that we've been doing is apprentice programs for people who wanted to come in and learn that particular role or wanted to shift roles and things like that. So we've been doing a lot of apprentice programs to build up skills in that area.
Fantastic.
And of course, finding good mentors is always an important key.
And scaffold the experience. Start small and build it up. Structure it.
And from my experience, I think I would learn also how things can break. And for me, this was the best experience. What can possibly break here? And thank you very much. We are out of time, but it was a great discussion. We have a Q&A in Slack going on in parallel with this. So if you have any questions, please come on Slack, ask questions to our fantastic panelists. And I see you all in the next sessions. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.